As concerns over flooding grow nationwide, so does confusion over flood insurance. Just ahead on America's Weather tonight, we have an expert from the Insurance Information Institute on what you need to know. And with all of the recent flooding disasters throughout the entire country, many homeowners are left scrambling to pick up the pieces. Our next guest is here to talk about flood insurance and how to protect yourself from any flood-related disaster. Joining us now is Communications Director with the Insurance Information Institute, Michael Berry. Michael, thanks so much for joining us.
Good to be with you.
So with all of the recent flooding we've been reporting on here at Fox Weather, what will flood insurance cover?
Well, the big thing to keep in mind for starters is the homeowner's insurance policy is not going to cover you from flood. You need a flood insurance policy separate and apart from the homeowner's insurance policy to be covered for flood-caused damage. And the definition of a flood basically is water coming from the ground up. So as you've been covering all day and over the weekend, it's water that's rising from a river or a creek. If you're near the coastline, we're talking about the ocean. But a lot of people who need flood insurance oftentimes don't have it, and that's because they're not in a FEMA designated flood zone and it's optional. So I think the thing to keep in mind for people in Washington or any other state where there's been the atmospheric river, where there's been intense rainfall, is to talk to your insurance professional about whether you need a flood insurance policy, even if you're not in a FEMA designated flood zone.
Sadly, I saw stories of this everywhere when I was living down in Florida. You hate to see it, but once you get flooded once, what happens then? Can you still apply for flood insurance? I know for a lot of folks down in Florida, some people being priced out of their neighborhoods are unable to get flood insurance for a second time.
Yeah, that does become an issue, and FEMA has also acknowledged exactly what you're talking about, is that they don't want to have to pay these repetitive losses. Oftentimes, particularly what the issue was with Congress. And by the way, Congress has a lot to say with this. FEMA, of course, is the federal government, so they are the underwriter of these losses. But I think the big thing in Florida, and I know we're here to talk about Washington, but Florida, you raise a good point, because where are all the flood insurance policies in the United States? They're really 40% of them are in 3 states, and they're the states you'd expect. It's Florida, it's Louisiana, it's Texas. Normally, when I'm having this conversation, or anybody in the insurance industry is having this conversation, it's hurricane-prone states, and flood is a natural part of the aftermath of a hurricane. What we're seeing here in the Pacific Northwest is really, and I thought your segment earlier explained it pretty well. I mean, we're looking at, you have to go back at least 15 years to see a November as wet as this one in the Seattle area. So again, it's a tough sell. I think of Washington. You also have earthquake risk, and that's another policy that's separate and apart from a homeowner's insurance policy. So people have competing demands on their checkbook. So to turn around and say, well, the homeowner's insurance policy is not enough, you have to look into flood, you have to look at an earthquake policy. I can understand some policyholders would be skeptical about the need for having all 3 of them. But given what's been going on in the state of Washington the last couple of weeks, I think you'll probably see individuals taking a second look at flood insurance at the very least.
And Michael, you make an interesting point there. What do you do in an area you expect flooding in some places like Florida, unfortunately? What about places that aren't even in designated flood zones by FEMA? Is this something where people in some of these areas should be going out to get flood insurance, even if you don't necessarily need it?
Yes, you don't have to get a flood insurance policy just because you're in a FEMA designated flood zone. The reason you oftentimes have to buy it is because the lender who helped you finance the purchase of the property insisted that you buy it because they have a financial stake in your property. But no, I think the thing that you have to look at is, yes, a FEMA designated flood zone, you're almost certainly going to be asked to buy it. But I think, and if I could give a little plug here for the Insurance Information Institute website, iai.org, we have a section up there called the Resilience Accelerator, where you can look and see what the take-up rate for flood insurance is in your particular county. So if you're house hunting, or even if you're already been there for many years, you may want to look and see what's the take-up rate? When I say take-up rate, I'm talking about what's the percentage of households that have flood insurance in your neighborhood. And that may be a signal to you as to whether or not you should get it as well.
Michael Berry, thanks so much for joining us. Running out of time here, but great information. We'll always think ahead. Michael Berry, Communications Director with the Insurance Information Institute. Thanks so much.